Well, good morning. Today's topic is the power of belief, and a key idea in our teaching, and it has to do with the recognition that we experience the world according to our beliefs. And I want to share a little story to open. This is a story that Dr. David Walker shared at Asilomar, a dozen or so years ago, and it's kind of cute. It's called "A Goody Two-Shoes Finds Out What a Friend She Had in Jesus." The other day I went to the local Christian bookstore where I saw a "Honk If You Love Jesus" bumper sticker. And I was feeling particularly uplifted that day, so I bought that bumper sticker and put it on the back bumper of my car. And I'm really glad that I put it on the back bumper of my car, because what an uplifting experience followed. I was stopped at the light of a busy intersection, just lost in thought about the goodness of the world. And I did notice that the light had changed. It's a good thing someone else loves Jesus, or I might have never noticed that the light had changed. I found out that a lot of people love Jesus. Why, the guy behind me started to honk like crazy, and then he leaned out of his window and screamed, "For the love of God, go! Jesus Christ, go!" Well, everyone was honking, and I leaned out my window and waved and smiled to all these loving people. And I even honked my own horn a few times just to share in the love. There must have been a man from Florida back there, because I could hear him yelling something about a sunny beach. I saw another guy waving in a funny way with only his middle finger stuck up in the air. When I asked my teenage son in the back seat what this meant, he said, "Oh, it was nothing. Probably a Hawaiian good luck sign or something." Well, I've never met a person from Hawaii, so I leaned out the window and gave him the good luck sign right back. My son burst into laughter while even he was enjoying the love of this religious experience. A couple of people were so caught up in the joy of the moment that they got out of their cars and were walking toward me. I just knew they wanted to pray or ask what church I attended, but that is when I finally noticed that the light was changing, so I waved one more time to my loving brothers and sisters and drove through the intersection. I was the only car that got across the intersection before the light changed again. And I felt kind of sad that I had to leave my brothers and sisters and all the love that we had shared. So I slowed the car down, leaned out the window, and gave them all a Hawaiian good luck sign as I drove away into the sunset. What a lovely moment. Now, we probably all know somebody like that. You know, that the interesting thing was, the world to her was exactly what she believed it to be. And the world to the people behind her was exactly what they believed it to be. And we're all having our own experience, and it has to do with belief. And, that's the way it is. I heard a saying one time said the people that don't get it never know that they don't get it. Because when you know you don't get it, all of a sudden you got it, right? So it really is a different experience, and we all have beliefs that are akin to the beliefs that were in that story. We all have some beliefs, every single one of us, that are, we might say, not necessarily reality-based. And as long as we hold those beliefs, we tend to see the world through that lens. The kinds of beliefs that I'm talking about are, you might have a belief that you don't deserve good in your life, that you're not worthy of good. You might have a belief that you just have bad luck, that things just don't break for you, or that you have to struggle to make it in the world. You might have a belief that you're sickly, or a belief that nobody wants to be your friend. And I would posit that all of those beliefs are on a par of believing that the waving your hand with the middle finger extended is a Hawaiian good luck sign. They are divorced from the truth. But until you understand that, until you really get that, and as long as you hold the false belief, it continues to be true in your world, in your experience. So belief is so key. It's been said there's no power in the universe greater than human belief. Because once we believe something, it controls and directs how we experience all of life. Frank Lloyd Wright said this, the architect. The thing always happens that you really believe in, and the belief in a thing makes it happen. Now, here's somebody that, if you know about Frank Lloyd Wright, he was a famous architect. He had a unique vision. When he first started out, the other architects thought he was insane, thought he was a rank amateur who was designing structures that no one would want, that wouldn't work. And yet, he in fact, what he was one of the most visionary architects that ever lived. You see, and what he was able to do was to hold to that vision. He was able to see the value in his own beliefs, in his own way of seeing the world, despite the fact that all of the experts at the time, back in the early 20th century, were telling him, you can't do this, you'll never make a living with these crazy designs. But he held fast. Now, how many of us maybe could be a Frank Lloyd Wright, but we kind of gave in? We tried to fit in, I remember when many of you know I started in government, in law enforcement, and there's a saying, and I know it's not just exclusive to government. You gotta, if you want to go along, you got to get along, right? So you find out how to fit in, and you do that. You don't make any waves, and you do that for 25 years, and you get a pension. Now, if you're a visionary and you want to go along to get along, you're going to have to keep your vision to yourself, aren't you? Because you're not going to see room for it. Because a true visionary is the one that's willing to really upset a lot of people. Because you're going to be coming up with something that's new. And you know what? People don't like stuff that's new unless they look around and other people agree it's okay to like it. When a new product comes out, let me read the reviews. I really like that. Let me see what other people say, I don't want to be the only one dressed this way. Right? So you go to the store and you buy what other people are wearing in general, and there are people that wear whatever they want, and we look at them and go, whoa, well, I'm really proud of you, but don't stand too close to me. People might think we're together. All these different areas in life where there is this kind of I don't know if there's so much a pressure to conform as there is just an expectation of conformity. And that we buy into the idea that by conforming, we'll be successful. When the people that really change the world are, by definition, nonconformists. You can't change the world if you're a conformist. Because conformists repeat what's already done. Nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be, let's put it there, I don't know if you want to be a visionary. If you are a visionary, you can't express that vision by being a conformist. Ernest Holmes said, what we demonstrate today, tomorrow, and the next day is not as important as the tendency which our thought is taking. So what he's talking about here is the idea of creating beliefs has a little bit of a long trajectory. Sometimes we're looking at a very narrow space in time. You say, well, this week I had a bad week, so let me look at what I was thinking about, and let me think about something else so that tomorrow is better than today. But what's more important is, what is your daily thought pattern like if you averaged it out over 6 months or a year or 5 years? Is your thought pattern such that it's generating enough change in your belief system to keep you moving forward, to keep you growing, to keep you expanding? Or does your life look pretty much the same as it did 5 years ago? When I talk about spiritual leadership in our organization sometimes, and one of the things I'll often say is, if your center looks the same as it did 5 years ago, you're a failure. Not to say there isn't quality in that, but this is a teaching about growth, about change, about not even change, transformation, which is growth on steroids, or change on steroids. And if your own organizational piece of the teaching isn't transforming at the same time, what are you doing? The nature of the universe is, it's a dynamic universe. Dynamic simply means everything's moving. And it tends to be moving in a direction toward greater organization and greater complexity. And it doesn't do it neatly. You may have noticed there's a lot of chaos in the universe at every level. At the subatomic level, there's nothing but chaos from our standpoint of understanding how, everything here seems to be relatively stable. You looked in the mirror this morning and saw roughly the same person you saw yesterday. Right? But if you were a subatomic particle, you'd be completely different. You might not even be there today. But you'd be back. Because subatomic particles disappear and appear out of reality in ways that aren't pattern specific. And when you get to the large level, the big cosmic level, stars and stuff are blowing up all the time. You look out through a telescope and, there's everything you see, a nebula, the nebula, those beautiful things that we see with the telescopic pictures they have these days, the beautiful nebula with all the colors, that means something blew up. Something big. That seemed probably pretty stable, and all of a sudden, ba-boom, it blew up. And out of that chaotic explosion, we know, comes new materials, new levels of complexity, new elements that allow more complex structures to be formed in the universe. That in the universe, nothing goes to waste. All the stuff that we're physically made out of is recycled. You're a recycled being. Every atom in you has been in other stuff. And every atom in you will be in other stuff. Right? We know that. So what is my particular lifespan of X number of years in this little corner of the galaxy which is in the corner of the subcluster of galaxies and on ad infinitum? What is the tendency in which my thought is taking? Am I growing in my experience? Am I inviting change into my life? Am I living my life as an adventure? An adventure is simply being miserable on purpose, or being scared on purpose, or being in the unknown on purpose. See, if I were to take you out right now and drag you back and forth across the parking lot, you'd probably find that to be a negative experience. But our daughter is at Disneyland paying money to ride up in these rides to have the same kind of an emotional experience of, oh my God, am I going to live? And we call that what she's having an adventure because she's choosing to do it. There are people, they call it a T-type personality. They kind of addicted to thrills. So they're the ones that bungee jump and do all that crazy stuff. Evel Knievel's probably the greatest example, right? Jumping across canyons on a motorcycle. And he wasn't happy till he broke every bone in his body twice. Right? That because life didn't feel complete without that. Now, that's probably a little extreme. If we were all like that, the world, we'd really have some chaos, wouldn't we? There'd be motorcycles jumping by you as you go out of your house in the morning. So it's not necessarily we have to be that way. Each of us has our own temperament. Each of us has our own way of being, our own kind of a sense of how, if we were fully expressed, what would the tonality of that be? For some, it might be a very extroverted kind of experience. For others, it might be a very introverted kind of experience. Some of us might be out in the world making a big splash. Others might be sitting by themselves, creating and writing or drawing or making music. There isn't one way to do it. But see, if the problem is all of creation suffers when so many of us don't do it. Do what? Bring our gift into expression fully. We have friends, and many of you know them, Tom Vacola and Francis Fuji used to be members here. They moved up to Idaho, and they run a company called CEO2, and they work with executives. And Tom talks about one of the studies that was done, a very, very comprehensive study of the American business place. 84% of people in the American business place are in the wrong job. By that means, and when you look at what they could be doing or should be doing in terms of fully expressing who they really are, they find themselves in a job that doesn't let them do that. They also found that 70-some% of managers are not engaged with their jobs. It's okay, because most of the workers aren't either. So the typical workplace is people walking around, not wanting to be there, doing something they don't want to do, yelling at each other. And you know, that's why Monday mornings are such a happy time on the freeway. I have to drive on the freeway to get to where I have to work, because I have to get paid so I can go home and have a drink. And we think of people that maybe aren't in that predicament, that are living their truth, are so few and far between. Because we think it has to be somebody like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or somebody that's in the stratosphere economically. But no, there's lots of really happy people that aren't making a whole lot of money but are just thrilled with what they do every day. And they're probably people you wouldn't pay a lot of attention to because we're conditioned to be drawn to what the culture calls success. You know? So somebody sitting over here in a corner. I remember in the police department, there were a lot of happy people. There was this one guy, we called it finding a home. It was like when you'd find a job where you could get off the road if you didn't like working the road and patrol. There were lots of little cubby holes where, you know, with these odd little details that cops could do. And this one guy ran the impound lot for the county. He was in a trailer way out in West Dade near the Everglades. And any given day, there'd be anywhere from 400 to 600 cars there, and he'd go out every day and count them. And he'd have a little tally sheet to fill out, and every time a car came in, he'd write down the tag and serial number, and he'd go in and run it on the computer to see if it was stolen or who owned it and stuff like that. And when people came to get their car, you know, they'd have to... And that was his job, and he was the happiest man I ever met up to that point. He said, I have one fear, that they'll transfer me out of here. They'll find out I'm too happy. Because there was a general cultural belief that if you were happy, you weren't doing your job very well. You must not be working hard enough. Because the norm was unhappy people doing a job they had to do. Kind of interesting. And that's all what? That's a belief system. It's a belief system. What's the mental health of your workplace, if you're in a workplace? You know, if a bunch of psychologists were to come in and test everybody, would they put you all into an institution really quickly? You know, you people are crazy. What's the quality of the emotional and mental experience in your workplace? Do people care about one another? Is it humanistic? You know, is there pride in the work? Is there pride in the product or service that's being produced? Is there a collective sense of contributing to something greater? And so, you know, some people would say, well, what are you kidding? I remember one time I had a conversation like this with a guy. Well, if it was like that, they wouldn't have to pay you. They only pay you because you're not doing something you don't like to do. There's a lot of people that believe that. Shut up, you're getting paid, aren't you? You know? Yeah, but not very much. Ha, ha, ha. You know the quality of the discourse that goes on, you know? What is the tendency which our thought is taking? If you were to take the trajectory of your thinking over a period of months or years, is there change? Is there movement against the mean? Is it moving toward a greater place? Are you a higher level thinker today than you were 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago? I don't often quote the Bible, but here's one. Matthew chapter 7, ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asks receives, and he that seeks finds, and to him that knocks it shall be opened. Now, a lot of people think that just means ask for what you want. No, metaphorically, what it means is to ask in the old usage. See, the old usage to ask didn't mean you were hoping for a response. To ask was to expect. Back in the day when Caesar would ask that his troops amass, it wasn't a question. There was an expectancy. So what this is talking about is, how do you think? What demands do you make on life? Ask and it shall be given. Demand and it shall be given to you. In other words, realize who you are and live from that center, and the world, the universe, simply corresponds to that. It's what it does. It's what it's doing now. The problem is most of us aren't asking very much. Most of us are demanding nothing. I just hope today isn't as miserable as yesterday. And hope is a false emotion. If I hope, that means I'm not going to do anything about it, right? I'm going to hope it gets better. But what if it only gets better in response to a change in consciousness in you? By hoping, I'm not saying I'm going to change my consciousness. I'm just saying I hope the world changes. And you may notice the world usually doesn't respond that way. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Do you go after what you desire? Not from a fear that you won't get it, but from a recognition that it's yours. A good life is yours for the taking. But you have to take it. Doesn't mean you take it away from someone else. Maybe claim would be a better word. Are you claiming a good life? Or are you hoping for one? See the difference in the energy between the two? One is about, when I claim it, I expect it. When I hope it, well, someone has to give it to me if I hope for it, right? What if they're not in the mood to give it to me, and I'm not claiming it? We have a number of cats, as many of you know. And, cats are like a lot of animals. There's alpha cats and beta cats. The alpha cat is more dominant, and the beta is more submissive. And the smallest of our cats is the alpha. And his brother is probably twice the size, but gives totally defers to the alpha cat at mealtime. The big cat will cry and ask for food, and you put the food down and he waits, and the other one comes in and eats. Now, the morning and evening, they each have their own bowl, but snack time is one bowl. Don't ask me why. And the other day, I happened to be home for the mid-morning snack, and I put some dry food in the bowl, and the beta cat sits back, and the alpha cat eats, and ate the whole bowl. And I'm thinking, well, gee, that's not fair, right? So I guess it was socialism on my part, but I went and got some more. I got some more food and put it in the bowl, and I chased the alpha cat away and let the beta cat look to make sure he was gone, then went up and ate. The alpha cat gets fed. The beta cat, maybe not. Now, the beta cat was probably sitting there hoping that the alpha cat would leave him some. And when that didn't work, was hoping that I would give him some food, and that worked out. But I happened to be home that day. If no one had been there to watch that, if I just put the food down and left, I would have assumed they both ate. So the point is, how are you with your life? And dominant doesn't mean beating up other people. It means claiming what's yours. If they were both alphas, they'd both get half the food. Or kill each other. Well, that's cats, We're much more civilized than that, right? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? And that's not saying see something different than you are. It's see what you really are and what you're becoming. What are you becoming? What's the next step for you in your growth? Vernon Howard, who was a great metaphysical writer, said, many of us knock on the door but remain outside because knocking and entering are entirely different actions. Knocking is necessary, consisting of reading books, attending meetings, asking questions. But entrance requires much bolder action. It requires one to enter into himself, to uncover hidden motives, to see contradictions, and to realize his actual power for self-change. When I knock, do I follow through? You know, they say, well, ask for what you want. Okay. The beta cat wanted some snacks. The alpha cat said, screw you. They only put enough down for me. I'm not in the mood to leave any today. Right? And the beta cat went, okay. Even though he's twice the size. Could knock that cat aside with a brush of his paw. But he doesn't. Because he sees himself differently. See? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as having the strength within you to be truly compassionate in your life? To be truly compassionate means not to resent anyone else for anything. Not to resent anyone else because they got more than you or less than you or because they were nasty to you or ignored you. To be truly compassionate means to always see oneness, and that takes a tremendous realization of strength. To stand on your own 2 feet. A truly compassionate person doesn't tend to get victimized because they don't invite it in any way. It's not part of their reality. You see? It's very interesting. One thing I noticed, statistics again, when I was a law enforcement officer, we knew from studies that approximately 10% of the population, 10% of the criminal population, committed 90% of the crimes. We also knew that of the victims, if you just took the people victimized by crime in any year, 20% of them had 80% of the crimes committed against them. They tended to be victimized again and again. So when you had a really high-functioning criminal meeting a really high-functioning victim, magic happened. There was this attraction like, hey, you know, we're meant for each other. Because you can't have a victim without a victimizer. And you can't have a victimizer without a victim. And it tends to be a relatively small percentage of population of either one, and they find each other regularly. We had a big issue with tourist crime in Miami some years ago. I mean, it's horrible. There were people getting murdered because there were just tricky ways of getting from the airport to the beach. And people would get off the freeway and ask for directions, and that was the end of them. Literally. We put 11 people in jail, and the crime went down 88%. See, it was the neighborhood. No, it wasn't. It was a few knuckleheads in the neighborhood who were doing all the crime. Once we identified them, got them in jail, the crime stopped. See, the belief system was Miami's dangerous. No, there were 11 people in Miami that were really dangerous. That's usually the way it is. But if you believe, you know, everything's dangerous. Remember the great Bill Cosby routine about the snakes? When he and his brother were little, he was about 3 and his brother was 4, and they were in their cribs. And his mother was out for the evening, and his dad wanted to go down to the corner and have a beer. So he had them in the cribs, and he opens the door and says, are you kids being quiet? You're going to sleep now, right? Yeah, Daddy, we're going to sleep. Okay, well, I'm going to come back in a minute, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of snakes on the floor. And if you get out of your crib, they'll bite you. So stay in those cribs. And he comes back, opens the door, and he says, I'm putting the snakes in now, And the room's dark, right? And imagine a 3- and 4-year-old thinking, you know. So Bill and his brother start talking. Says, you think he really put snakes in here? I don't know. I think he might have. Bill says, well, I'm going to stick my toe. He says, snakes? He starts talking to the snakes. Snakes, I know, I'm just a little boy. I know you won't hurt me. I'm going to stick my toe out of the crib. Just lick it a little. Just lick it a little. Now, if you think your room is full of snakes, you'll behave like your room is full of snakes. If you think the world is going to hell in a handbasket, you'll behave like the world is going to hell in a handbasket. If you think everything in your life is difficult, you'll behave like everything in your life is difficult. There's no difference. And you'll look at people that may just seem to be going right past you in terms of their ability to function in the world, and you go, well, what are they, magicians? Are they different? What's going on? And the answer is no. They're claiming a greater truth than you are at the moment. They're not just seeing the possibility, they're claiming it. They've knocked and they've entered. This is a quote from Mark a couple chapters later. Everything is possible for him who believes. Everything is possible for him who believes. Do you believe that? You know, it's one of those things where Dr. Holmes says in the textbook that the teaching works. When you don't believe in the teaching works by appearing not to work. I don't believe this will work. Oh, it didn't. That's why he says if you're going to practice his teaching, you better believe it first. Because without the belief, everything else falls back. So here's what I need to pay attention to every day. And if I do, you do. What do I believe? Based on my experience of this day, what do I believe? Based on the expectation I have before going into something I consider challenging, what do I believe? And does my belief promote the outcome I desire? Am I seeing things from the highest and best possible light? Or have I accepted a belief that something's wrong with me, that something's wrong with the world, that this doesn't work, that doesn't work, that. And the world, you may have noticed, there are some negative people in the world. I saw one yesterday. And they're loud. And sometimes they have statistics to back them up, and they have high office. And it takes courage to ignore them. Or at least to suspend belief until you see what the truth is. And then ignore them. Because otherwise, the Frank Lloyd Wright in you will never come out. The Ernest Holmes in you will never come out. And more importantly, the you in you will never come out. We'll look around and try to fit in. We'll see, what is that person doing for success, and I'll try to copy that. What is that person that's screwed up doing? I'll try to avoid that. Never looking to who I really am. And as Gary Simmons, my dear friend Gary Simmons says, who did I come here to be? Who did I come here to be? And I'd ask you the question, who did you come here to be? And is that who you're being? If not, you got to believe. So thank you, and namaste.